So picture this. We have already been through several special sessions. We still have not passed the budget. And I really use the term we loosely because as a member of a super minority, my influence on when the budget passes is minuscule. So we get the call to go back up the middle of May. We go up, we gavel in the budget special session. And we know that the session is going to run till the 29th of May. So we know at some point we're going to be back to then vote, debate on, have questions about the budget. Now, keep in mind that we are doing this all during campaign season. We are trying to knock doors. We cannot do call time unless you have a fundraiser that was already pre-scheduled. You are trying to also be a sitting legislator. You're trying to do the work that is expected of you when you are already sitting in the Florida House. We finally go up at the end of May and we vote on the budget finally. And then we get the call for special session F that is going to start on that Monday. I had to come back home to the district. There were a lot of things that I had to do. And so staying up in Tallahassee for the weekend was not an option. And it's a 4-hour drive. So it takes a lot of your time to drive up there if you're driving yourself. And in which this case, staff was not allowed to go up with us. And I often drive myself. And it really is sort of a time suck because you are just spending so much time in your car. So have to turn right around and go back and then debate and learn what the plan is actually for property taxes because we did not even know what the plan was at the time. So, that is a special session. And so I want to, welcome you to episode 2 of In Session with Rep. Rita. And I want to go behind the scenes and talk about what really happens during a special session and, how it differs from a regular session perhaps and a few other little, pulling back the curtain sort of moments. For those who don't know, my name is Representative Rita Harris. I represent House District 44 in the Florida House, and that is most of South Orange County, Florida. I have been in the Florida House since 2022. I am, as I've mentioned in my opening, one of 34 Democrats in a legislative body of 120. We are in a super minority, and the same is said for the state Senate. There are 40 senators, and I believe 11 are Democrats, so they are also in a super minority. So it creates a lot of difficulty when it comes to not just passing legislation, but also stopping bad legislation. And it also has created an environment where we are seeing a lot of these special sessions. I generally try to not, but there's just a lot to cover in some of these episodes, and I find it really helpful to have this as a reminder. So if I'm looking off camera, I'm just referring to my notes. I want to make sure that I cover everything about a special session. So what is a special session? It is just a session that is called outside of our regular legislative session. And for the state of Florida, and each state is different, but for the state of Florida, we have a part-time legislative session. We meet for 60 days out of the year, and we will meet this upcoming session. We will be meeting in March to May, but during an election year, we will be meeting from January to March. We also have prior to session committee weeks, and that is where we are often going back and forth to Tallahassee to attend committee hearings, file our bills, work our bills through the committee process, and get everything in order so that when the session does begin, we are really ready to roll and start hearing all the bills that have been filed and have worked their way through the committee process. Any session that is called outside that regular session is considered a special session. Usually they are called for things that arise or come up outside of the regular legislative session. An emergency or something big happens might be a reason to call a special session. Lately, they've been called very frequently And even more recently, there have been more special sessions around the budget. In last session, as well as this last session, but also the session before that, session went long because the one constitutional requirement of the state legislature in Florida is to pass a balanced budget. And so if we don't pass the budget, they will not be able, there will be no mechanism to fund the government. So we are required to pass that budget. And this last session and the session before that, we did not pass the budget. So those were automatic. One was an extension of the regular session. So instead of really ending session, it just extended the regular session. But this year we stopped session, we gavelled out, or we sine-died out of session, and then we were called back several times to deal with a few issues. I will be completely honest. I have said, and I believe in my heart of hearts, that I do not want this podcast to be partisan in nature. Meaning the intention of the things that I say are not meant to be partisan, but the truth sometimes is partisan, and there's just no way around it. And so I don't want to tiptoe around that either, to say that some of these special sessions that have been called seem to be less about what is needed to be done for the state of Florida and more about political jockeying between the legislative branch and the executive branch, which are both in the same party. So this is intra-party politics coming into play now, and the impact that it's having on the state of Florida is that we are being called into these special sessions to deal with things like redistricting and to deal with finishing up the budget, and then to deal with, property tax reform. That is something the governor wants. And since we have a line item veto in the state of Florida, oftentimes appropriations are sort of held up. So, it's one of those things where you don't like to see that this is what's happening, but it's pretty obvious to anybody that's paying attention that that's what is happening. And it's at great cost to Floridians, because it does cost a lot of money to have us, up in Tallahassee for special session. They have to have a lot more people in the Capitol to deal with all of us legislators up there, not to mention paying for the transportation up there and paying for our board while we're up there. So it's at great cost. So ideally what you want to see is everything get done in that 60-day session. Now, I said earlier, we are considered a part-time legislature, which is one of the reasons why we don't get paid a lot of money. We make about $30,000 a year, and that is because we are considered part-time. What does that mean? Well, it really simply just means that we're only up in Tallahassee for a part of the year. We're not up in Tallahassee all year, or at least generally we're not up there all year. But in a world where everything is functioning the way it should, we would only be up there for 2 months for the session. And then of course, you're up there for a few months for the committee weeks that precede the session. So that's what that means. But the reality is that for so many of us, we don't work part-time. So many of us are full-time in that we are full-time answering constituent emails, full-time doing events, full-time attending events in the district, full-time, being engaged and on the ground. And some of us even are at the doors full-time, knocking doors. So what it means, like I said, is, in its most basic definition, is that we are only in Tallahassee for 60 days for session. But the reality is many of us really do work full-time or more than full-time. It's work that I really love doing. Even if it's sometimes hard, it really is enjoyable and I love it. But it is for me a full-time job, and I don't mind that. It's absolutely what I signed up for. So and when I get better at this, and this is a little side note, I do have ADHD, so sometimes I will kind of go on a little side quest. When I get better at this podcast thing that I'm doing, and I think is really important because we have to meet people where they're at in all spaces, I think there would be nice natural sections to kind of pause and kind of transition, but I am not a podcast engineer, and so I am working with what I've got. But this would have been a great time to segue into the call. And the call of the special session is what it is. It's the call. It's the notice that we are going into a special session. And within the call of the special session will be what that special session will be addressing. So in the instance of special session F, we were dealing with property tax. And that means that if you want to file a bill yourself, it has to be within that call of the session, or it will be ruled as not germane to the call, and you won't be able to file it. You can file amendments on bills that were filed. We filed a lot of amendments regarding property taxes, and this happened to me last time, and I am ready. I've got some water. My allergies, folks, and I also have a trusty lozenge because the last time I was recording a podcast, I got into such a coughing fit. And since I'm not a podcasting engineer, I'm not really good at stopping and starting again and splicing, so I had to just power through it, which is what I'm going to do today. So you have to stay within that narrow call, but we did a lot of amendments for the property tax bill that was filed, the House Joint Resolution, and we filed amendments that dealt with making sure that certain essential services were funded, such as senior services, veteran services. So we filed a lot of really good amendments that would have addressed a lot of what was missing in how these counties and these cities and these municipalities are going to pay for the services that they offer without the money that they usually use to pay for them. Since the HJR didn't offer that, we felt it was really important to put that into an amendment to make the case that these should be other services that should be guaranteed to be paid for by the state if needed, in order to ensure that they stay whole and they can keep being offered services like veteran services, senior services, emergency services, ensuring that they are paid for infrastructure, ensuring that they're the funds that are needed for filling potholes or other infrastructure needs would be there. We also filed some other amendments. I filed an amendment that would give truth in ballot verbiage on the amendment when it's on the ballot, explaining to voters that this could very much be a tax shift and not quite a savings. All of these amendments, however, were voted down. So, that is one of the issues, that we do file these amendments. However, very rarely are they accepted and voted in, even though a lot of them are really good. And it's not always a strategy for messaging. At times it's a strategy to really strengthen, or either strengthen a bill or make a bill less harmful. In this case, it was definitely to make a bill less harmful, because there are a lot of concerns about the impact that this bill is going to have on local governments and their ability to pay their bills. And I will say also that a day in Tallahassee looks different during a special session than it does during a regular session. In some ways, it's faster because, we often will roll, which is when they hear a bill, ask questions about a bill, file amendments about a bill, debate a bill, and then vote on a bill all in one day. Things move more quickly, but in another way, it actually slows down a little bit, because often during a special session, we are dealing with maybe one bill or two. Very rarely are we dealing with many bills, whereas during a regular session, there are a lot of bills that are rolling and are being filed, and there are a lot of bills that you need to track. Whereas during a special session, you really do have the time to concentrate and focus on that one bill. As I mentioned earlier, there's only so much to be done to actually stop legislation when we don't think it's going to be in the best interest of the state. So we're still in a situation where a lot of that is not predetermined, but we do know that if we're hearing a bill, most likely it's going to pass. The majority party would not put a bill up, especially in session, especially like on the floor, if they did not think it was going to pass. So, all the work that we do, we often do knowing that it's not going to change, the outcome. I often get asked, what happens like behind closed doors when you are in special session, and even during regular session, but since this is about special session, we'll keep it to that. It's less busy. There's a lot less traffic in the Capitol during a special session, again, because we're not hearing the same amount of bills, and we're often hearing one or two bills, and they're very narrow in scope. So perhaps there are advocates that are really interested in that one bill, and they will be in the Capitol, trying to lobby us for or against, or trying to tell us, why we should support it or why we shouldn't support it. There are a lot of meetings during committee weeks. There are a lot of meetings because groups are coming up to meet with you because they are, they have appropriations that are being filed or budget requests that are being filed. Other groups are meeting with you. They're just constituent advocacy groups, and they want to talk to you maybe about bills that are working their way through the committee process, whether they're for or against them. Constituents themselves want to come up and talk to you. You get student groups like Youth in Government that come and talk with you. Colleges, universities, they come and talk to you because they usually have appropriations as well. There's just a lot of activity and a lot of meetings, and especially your first two sessions when you're first elected. And if you've never been elected before, because a lot of these different organizations, they're trying to build a relationship with you and get to know you and see where you stand on things and things of that nature. So it's really meeting heavy. During special session, it's not as meeting heavy. It is more working within your caucus to develop, the strategy that you're going to have to go into the special session, whether it be that you want to file amendments, whether you be wanting to debate, all that, all of that sort of is where it's different, what you're going to, how you're going to sort of go at it in terms of strategy. So I think those are, really it is just, it is like a regular session in the sense that we're going to have a caucus meeting. We're going to, review the bill. We're going to meet with stakeholders. We're going to have conversations. It's just that it's just about that one bill, and it's not, you're going from that conversation to another conversation about a different bill to another conversation about a different bill. As someone who has ADHD, I find this type of work to be like where I enjoy the fact that there's a lot of movement and we're doing a lot of different things in a day. It's a fast pace when you're up in Tallahassee, but it's really enjoyable. Of course, nothing beats being home in the district because, there's no place like home, and you just miss your friends, you miss your family, you miss, how familiar everything is, you miss being in your own home. And so nothing beats that. But it is during a special session, things feel, they are more stressful in one way because you are up there when you really should be home. Shouldn't be up there at that time because regular session has already ended. But at the very least, you're just focused on one thing, and it's not, 5 or 6 bills that you're analyzing and drafting questions and drafting debate or researching or getting calls from advocates and, meeting with other lawmakers. It's just one bill. So in that sense, it's a lot easier. I wanted to go over some myths of the legislature. It doesn't even have to really pertain to a special session. It could be just about serving in the Florida House in general. And so I wrote down some some myths that I have heard. I'm sure there are others, and I would love for you to share, like, what myth have you heard about the Florida House? I would love to address them during maybe the next podcast. But so one misconception is that we get paid a lot of money. Again, like, we are part-time, and so we are paid part-time, but we only make about, like I said, give or take $30,000 a year. Senators make the same amount. Our staff makes more than us because our staff is considered full-time, so they get full-time pay. They still don't make as much money as they should. And I feel like I think a lot of people think that we make the same, and I'm not complaining. I want everyone to know that. I'm just clarifying because I think a lot of people think that we get paid the same amount as the Congress, and we do not. But the Congress is a full-time gig, and it is further away, but we do not get paid anywhere near what the Congress gets paid. And then also, like, we are in Congress. Like, a big myth that I feel like happens quite frequently is people are not sure where I serve. So they think I'm in the Congress, or they're not quite sure. And so that's a huge misconception too, is that we serve in the Congress. We go up to Washington, and I correct people. I remember the first time I was running, I knocked the door and somebody was like, "You're running against Val Demings," which was funny because I was not. I was running for state representative, but it was also a little stressful because at the time Val Demings wasn't even running for Congress anymore. She was running for Senate, and Maxwell Frost, now Congressman Maxwell Frost, was running for her seat. So I was not running for Senate, and I was not running against Val Demings, and I was running for State House. And so I kind of had to, clarify where I was running and what the duties are, where I serve, how I go up to Tallahassee and we file bills that deal with the state, and we work with state agencies, and we don't work with the federal, but we work alongside our federal counterparts to serve our, constituents together. People get a little confused, and I understand it is confusing. There are many levels of government, and we'll be addressing that this season. We're going to talk to a few other people who are in different roles and kind of go over what it is that they do versus what it is that we do. Everything is scripted. That's another one. Some things are scripted. So when we're hearing a bill and you will say, like, show the bill rolled over for third reading, that is all scripted, but a lot of times there are things that are unscripted, especially in committee meetings. Committee meetings are probably the least scripted place in Tallahassee at the Capitol. A lot of times when people debate or when they're asking questions in a committee meeting, those are genuine questions that they are genuinely asking. These are questions that happened during, while they were hearing the bill. The debate is usually genuine. There are moments where things are scripted because there's procedures, and so, it will go by the procedure, but often our debates and our questions, especially, like I said, in committee, but even on the House floor, are not scripted. If I want to make sure, because I have a habit of sort of going off topic and wandering in a different direction, and we have right now only limited amount of time to speak. So we have a very structured debate process. If I'm trying to make a point, I want to write down everything, and I hate it because I'd rather just talk. But if I want to make sure I hit all of the points I'm trying to hit, I will often write my speech because I want to ensure that I hit everything. And if I write it down, then I'll be sure to say all the things that I feel need to be said about the bill. So it's scripted in that sense. I'll sometimes write out my my debate against or for a bill, or for and against an amendment. But most of the time, especially with amendments, I will just debate sort of off the cuff. Let's see, what are some other ones? Bipartisan relationships. You can always find one thing that you will agree with someone from the majority party about, and then you try to work together on that one thing. And so for me, when we were running the anaphylaxis bill, Rep. Baker, who later became the Prime Co., came to me and said, I have a constituent in my district who really, really wants this to pass because this is something that she's been dealing with, and, how can I help with that? And so we worked together because, dealing with anaphylaxis, especially kids at school, is something that really shouldn't be bipartisan, or excuse me, should be bipartisan. It shouldn't be partisan. And she had a personal experience. And so you find those pathways. Also, for the most part, like, there really are a lot of bills where we just we vote together. They're just bills that I feel will make Florida safer or will be good for Floridians. We part our ways when it comes to bills that I think are going to be negative or have a negative impact on Florida. And those are, pretty substantial in what they do and how they impact Floridians. But we do work together where we can. And, we stand for our values when it's necessary. And that's what I always tell people. And let's see. Voting is the whole job. Voting is like a minuscule part of the job. The job is, in addition to going up to Tallahassee, it's researching the bills, analyzing the bills, creating strategy around the bills, working your own bills, trying to get your bills supported while also working to stop really bad bills, trying to change the language on some bills, trying to educate your community so they know about what bills are happening, working with other legislators to pass a bill or minimize harm on a bill. There's just a lot behind the scenes just when we're up in Tallahassee. Not to mention, like, when we get back to the district, it's, voting is just a tiny part of the job. It's a part of the job, and it's important, obviously, but there's just so much more to the job that we do. And like I said, my favorite part is just constituent services. I really enjoy working with constituents and ensuring that their needs are met. I've lived in this neighborhood I lived in Hunters Creek, or the Hunters Creek area, since 2002 when we first moved to Florida. I've lived in this house since 2009. And for somebody who moved a lot as a child, even in the same city, like, we would move a lot, even if we were just moving from one part of Phoenix to another, or from one part of New York to another. I've never lived in a place this long. And it's so strange for me. It's the weirdest feeling. But as someone who moved around as a kid, there were definitely strengths I got from that. I'm very adaptable. I've experienced a lot of different things. I've seen a lot of different communities. But one of the things that, was a negative was that I never was able to sort of plant my feet in like that saying, bloom where you're planted. I could never really fully bloom because I was never planted long enough to bloom. And so it's been an experience to live here for as long as I have. And I just love this community. And I just really feel like, in addition to raising my daughter here, I feel like I've grown up a lot in this area too. We moved to Florida when I was 28 years old. And I feel like I've just learned so much and have grown so much since being here. So I have great affection, and I'm always bragging on how great our district is, because it is. Let's see. So we went through the myth versus reality. I think I sort of answered that one, right? Like, it matters because I care about this community. I care about my neighbors. I care about the future of this community and ensuring that it's successful. I care about making sure that people feel welcome and seen and heard in this community. This community has given me so much. It's one way for me to give back. And I'm always really grateful for that opportunity. And it does not go unnoticed how lucky I am and how privileged I am to be in this position. I'm always grateful every single day for the opportunity to serve House District 44 and be the very best representative I can for such an amazing district. And I think that's a good place to end this episode. This was sort of a fun episode to do because people do ask a lot about special sessions, and I feel like this is a great way to kind of go over it. And so, yeah, this is sort of behind the scenes of a special session. Look for some upcoming episodes with other fellow electeds. Of course, we'll be talking about some of the Supreme Court decisions that just came down today. I want to get a chance to kind of dig into them and think about what I want to say about them. And you can follow us on socials, Rita for FL, and that's Rita, RITA, on Facebook, and Rita for Florida, FOR, on Instagram We're also on Substack, so look for us there. I often do virtual monthly town halls called Get Engaged, Stay Engaged. We deal with different topics there as well. And if you ever need anything, of course, you can reach out to rita.harris@flhouse.gov. Make sure it says .gov or it will get kicked back to you. We don't have the .com domain. And if there are any topics you would like to see discussed, please reach out and let us know. We're happy to oblige. If you have a really good idea or if you have any questions, reach out and we can answer some of them on air. Stay tuned for the next episode. Make sure that you subscribe and you share and you comment if you like this episode so other people can find it. And I feel like it's been storming a little bit, but I feel like it's about to get a little bit worse here in South Orange County. So definitely a good time to say goodbye.